I wish to be called Victoria.
Queen Victoria.
She was less than 1.6 meters tall, yet became the youngest queen of Britain. In 1837, Britain's rule was in crisis, and William IV retired to Windsor Castle. The heir to the throne was his niece, Alexandrina Victoria. When Victoria learned she was to become queen, it wasn't just her who was excited, but also her mother and her mother's lover, John. They wanted to marginalize Victoria and seize control. The former Prime Minister, Melbourne, also arrived after hearing the news, but his conversation with John was seen by Victoria. Not knowing whether Melbourne was an ally or an enemy, Victoria didn't give a clear response to his self-introduction. Victoria's uncle, Cumberland, held significant power and wanted to eliminate her to become the heir to the throne. When Victoria met with ministers for the first time, the young queen was nervous, but she still walked out calmly. Because her voice was so quiet, she was mocked. When it was time for her to swear an oath, Victoria didn't know the titles of the ministers, which was extremely awkward. Fortunately, Melbourne stepped in at the right moment, earning Victoria's favor. At the beginning of her time in the palace, Victoria was very happy. It was around this time that Melbourne also successfully obtained the position of the Queen's secretary. With Melbourne's help, Victoria found it much easier to manage state affairs. However, one day, she heard that John had an affair with Lady Flora. Victoria ordered the court doctor to investigate, giving her a reason to remove John. But after the examination, it was revealed that Lady Flora's swollen belly was due to a terminal illness. In the end, Lady Flora passed away in disgrace. The incident was quickly reported by the press, and the public began to criticize the Queen. Victoria herself also felt uneasy. The Queen asked her maid for advice on how to avoid pregnancy. After receiving the answer, she was very surprised. That night, after her husband fell asleep, she secretly got up and started jumping on the sofa. Although she wasn't sure if it would work, Victoria felt much more at ease. That day, as usual, Victoria continued jumping, but was caught by her husband. She explained that she also wanted to have a child, but she was afraid of the process. Albert told her that the only way to avoid pregnancy was abstinence, but of course, Victoria wouldn't agree. Soon, Victoria began to feel something was wrong with her body. Albert didn't understand what was happening, and after the doctor left, he went to her bedside. Victoria cried, saying that she was pregnant, but she was terrified. Albert comforted Victoria. Her mother used old methods to help relieve Victoria's morning sickness.
Your nurse is a virgin. Your husband is a man. Your doctor is a fool.
So now, everything must be done according to her advice. Her mother told Victoria to lie down after lunch until evening, and for dinner, she should eat animal organs. These were her experiences. But Victoria was thinking about state affairs, so her mother told her to rest and focus on the pregnancy. Giving birth to a prince was the most important thing. Victoria had heard some rumors and cried, saying Albert would eventually hate her body. Albert comforted her and confessed his love. At that moment, a government minister came to see them. The minister said childbirth was dangerous, and Victoria should think about the future. Victoria immediately appointed Albert as regent. Then Victoria asked if she were to die during childbirth, would Albert marry someone else? Albert laughed and said he would, and he would marry several others. Victoria laughed at his answer. Her mother saw this and quickly intervened, telling Victoria not to move too much as it could harm the baby. This was advice from someone with experience. To avoid getting pregnant, the woman jumped around on the couch, but this didn't work at all, and she ended up pregnant. Giving birth is a dangerous thing, so the Queen had to appoint her husband as regent. One day, her husband secretly ran out. He wanted to try sitting in the newly built train engine for his wife. Meanwhile, Victoria lay in bed, feeling down. Pregnancy had made her sensitive and fragile, and she missed her husband so much. Victoria, like a sorrowful little wife, silently waited for her husband to return. Victoria cried, saying she was afraid of the pain. Her husband comforted her, saying that childbirth was indeed a challenge, but she must remember that she is the Queen of England, and he would always be by her side. Victoria wanted to go out for a walk, but her mother told her to stay inside to avoid any accidents. Then her mother told her to nurse the baby herself, but Victoria didn't want to be tied down by the child and asked the maid to find a wet nurse.
So you will not be following your mother's example?
She is not a queen, and I am not a cow.
As her due date approached, Victoria became very worried. The maid comforted her, saying that as long as she held the baby in her arms, the unpleasant feelings would fade away. At night, Victoria woke up in her sleep, sensing that she was about to give birth, but she was still very afraid. A servant excitedly told the anxious crowd that the baby was coming. Outside the delivery room, The ministers gathered together. Victoria wasn't used to being watched like this and asked her husband to send them away. With tears in her eyes, Victoria gave birth to the baby in her husband and mother's arms. The Queen gave birth smoothly, and Victoria asked her husband if he minded that it was a girl. Then she promised him that they would have a son in the future.
How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child.
This was the birthday gift that the Queen Mother gave to her daughter, Queen Victoria. At that moment, a mouse suddenly jumped out of the cake. Victoria's panicked reaction and screams confirmed the rumors about the Mad King that her uncle had been stirring up. Ministers began to gossip about it.
The situation is getting out of hand, Melbourne. Cumberland thinks the little Queen listens to voices in her head, like her grandfather.
The Duke of Wellington told Prime Minister Melbourne that a new Prime Minister needed to be appointed quickly to form a cabinet. Soon, Parliament would force the Queen to appoint a regent. John once again requested to become Prime Minister, but Victoria refused. However, in the court, she no longer had any influence. In the end, Victoria ignored her mother's objections and asked Melbourne for help.
If I were to form a government now, critics would say that I had manipulated you for my own advantage.
Melbourne told her that the Queen could not choose the Prime Minister based on personal preference. He recommended the Duke of Wellington, but when Victoria summoned the Duke of Wellington, he declined, citing his old age, and suggested she appoint Sir Robert instead. In reality, he did not trust Victoria.
But I'm afraid that this is a battle you cannot win.
Victoria reluctantly summoned Sir Robert, who gave her a political lesson. He explained the essence of a constitutional monarchy, which made Victoria feel impatient. Then Robert suggested she marry one of her maids to a minister from the Conservative Party to strengthen the link between the monarchy and the cabinet. This way, the Conservative Party would be more supportive of the Queen's government.
I absolutely will not give up my lady, Sir Robert, and what's more, I believe you have no right to ask me.
The meeting ended on a sour note. When Victoria went to unveil her royal portrait, the crowd along the street questioned her. During the unveiling, Victoria struggled repeatedly to pull the rope. In the end, with Melbourne's help, she successfully completed the task. Melbourne returned to Victoria's side to continue assisting her. The Conservative Party still did not want things to go smoothly. Therefore, Melbourne needed to help Victoria find a stronger support system as soon as possible. The Queen looked around at the women who had their makeup done and felt envious. She thought she looked rather plain. Her maid next to her even mocked her. When she saw herself in the mirror, the Queen thought she would look beautiful if she had makeup on. The maid understood what the Queen meant, but this was her first time applying makeup as well. She decided to try it out on someone else first. After figuring out what each item was for, the maid began to help the Queen with her makeup. At the banquet, people noticed that Queen Victoria looked like a fairy, and even the maid behind her looked beautiful. The ladies present stood up and worshipped her, and the King of France also praised the Queen. Her husband, Albert, was already mesmerized. Soon it was time for the dinner, and the Queen felt a bit uncomfortable with their dining etiquette. Victoria didn't want to refuse the King of France's invitation. In the evening, Albert said he didn't like it there, and he didn't want his wife to wear makeup for others. To respect her husband's feelings, Victoria agreed. The attendants traveling with the Queen reacted differently. Some couldn't get used to the local food. A gentleman told his wife their bread was very fresh.
But it's such a peculiar shape.
Others went into the small woods with French noblewomen, but they came out quickly. Victoria didn't see her husband and went into the woods with someone, only to find Albert swimming in a pond. The Queen thought that only she should see her husband.